How are we? Welcome to the party. We're celebrating the launch of the incredible new book in the Butterfly Books series, My Mummy is a Footballer by Kerrine Bryan. And today we are not only going to get to hang out with Kerrine, but three additional amazing authors that we love knowing and are so grateful to have some time with. I now have the privilege of saying, Courtney, please join us on the stage, and Kerrine, you as well, and tell us about this amazing book series, Butterfly Books, and the latest edition. I'm gonna go away, but please, everyone that's on the line, tell us where you're joining us from, and don't hesitate to add any questions into the general chat or into the Q&A, and we will be sure to get to them. Take it away, ladies.
Yay! Thank you, everybody. Welcome to our author party today. And joining us today, it's very exciting for me as a mom of two boys who love Peppa Pig and really resonated with the title when I said it to them, My Mummy is a Footballer. And then they said it like Peppa, and it was just precious. And I knew we were on to something. So, Kerrine, I stumbled upon the exposure of the book and in its campaign for launch in the UK, where you are from, and I'd love to hear about that. But it was the resonation of the messages that can be so simple in their exchange in this kind of genre of a nightly book that I can read my kids every single night. Just exposes them to more inclusive mindsets and the normalcy of what we're really trying to celebrate and promote here. And I just really appreciate you coming and joining us to tell us the story of how how the book came from idea to hardcover and that process, and then also a little bit about the other person in your team and how you and your brother work together too. So dive in and tell us your story.
Sure. So the idea behind the book, I guess it goes way back. We started Butterfly Books, it's 6 years ago now, and it all started because I'm an electrical engineer, which is a male-dominated field of work. And when I was a kid, I didn't know what engineering was. And if anyone said engineering to me, I wouldn't have thought that it's something that I could do. And I think that's just a case of, the media and what you're told as a girl when you're a kid, what you can and can't do. I found out what it was when I was 17 and was already on my way to kind of training to be an accountant, but then changed route, became an engineer. And then started to go into schools to talk about, what it's like to be an engineer, and just to show kids that, people like me are engineers as well. When I was doing that, I found that when I was going to speak to children, there weren't many resources that I could use to kind of get the message across and address their misconceptions. So I guess the idea behind the first book was based on my own experiences. And the first book was My Mummy is an Engineer. So I wrote that book with my brother, Jason Bryan, and it's his birthday today as well.
Yeah, happy birthday, Jason!
And the reason why I decided it would be good to work with my brother is because I'm kind of strong. I was always strong in like the maths and science kind of subjects, studied engineering, but Jason studied English at university. So I thought that was like a good match to start writing the books. And then after the first book, as we started to get more exposure of the book, we had other people from other industries kind of come to us and say, oh, we've got that kind of issue in our industry. Right. So, we had the British Army that approached us to work on My Mummy is a Soldier, the English National Health Service for My Daddy is a Nurse, which was our first Daddy book, and London Fire Brigade for My Mummy is a Firefighter. And after them first 7 books, it was early last year, we were contacted by Lewes Football Club in England, who were the first football club in the world to pay their men and women equally. And they were really, interested in getting something written for women's football. So that's how My Mommy is a Footballer came about initially, and we published that on the 8th of March on International Women's Day.
Amazing.
Yeah.
It's such a great story, right, everybody? Right? And Luz, and for those of you who don't know, Luz, yes, is Maggie Murphy runs the women's side of Luz, and is demonstrating what it means to lead in the highest level of sport in the world, and to do it with integrity and representation. So to have to really be embraced by these organizations that are also really needing to normalize these messages. And when I was learning about the different books, I have someone in my life who is in each of those roles: a male nurse friend, a firefighter female friend, and a soldier, also a founding expert member. Haley Carter is a servicewoman. So there are so many different ways that we can celebrate it. And I just fell in love with the charm and the way you guys did it your way. I also love there's a slight role reversal in what would be expected with you and Jason, and you leading in the STEM and him being in the humanities. And historically, we've seen that reversed, right? So I love that. I love how that play and roles is so transparent for how you guys approach the work too. Like, yes, of course I'm an engineer and I'm a woman and I'm a woman of color, and you can be too. And so we're really excited about the whole series. So keep going with Luz and where you guys are in that whole journey too.
Yeah. So in fact, I'd say Jason, and maybe this is also stereotypical, is more of a football fan than me. Mm-hmm. But since I started on the books, I found myself watching a lot more women's football. I've actually become an owner, one of the owners of Lewis Football Club as well. So I encourage anyone else to do the same. You just go on their website.
She's an electrical engineer. She's an author, and she's an owner of a women's premier soccer team. She's a woman in soccer, y'all. This is who we're talking about. This is the celebrity. Okay, that is so exciting.
Yeah. So it's been an interesting year and journey, and throughout that journey, we've with all of the books that we write as well, we learn quite a lot about the industry, because we even me and Jason, we have our own misconceptions about what's involved in them careers and that kind of thing. So with My Mom is a Footballer, one of the most interesting things that I'd learned, which I didn't know, was that in England, women's football was really kicking off around the First World War, around the time of the First World War, and it was bigger than the men's game. So because the men were all at war, right. So the after the end of the war, the English Football Association actually banned women's football because it wasn't seen as the right kind of sport for women, and right. It was banned for 50 years. So they weren't allowed to play again until 1971. It was banned in 1921. So there's a big gap there, and there's lots of discussions. Yeah, lots of discussions around.
Yeah, talk about that's a real thing, right? And feeling so historical right now, and thinking about that being the reality for so many young girls in the world and other parts of the world, it really does require a cultural shift, and you're adding something to help that process start. Because imagine if it hadn't, and the reasons behind why, and misogyny runs deep, and how it creates real obstacles for pathways to exist. So the forging of the pathways into these three roles that you've created it certainly inspired me, and we wanted to inspire millions and millions in the world, and we really want to know how we can find it and support it and share it and get the message across.
Yes. So I guess what we plan to do now, now that it's published, is do as much work as we can in getting it out there. And we are, Butterfly Books is a social enterprise as well. So, you know, we're all about the social mission of addressing gender bias. So, you know, working, like, we want to try and collaborate with as many organizations as possible, because collaboration is really important. You know, I always see there's so many people doing the same kind of thing, but if we all came together and just, you know.
Right. We've been operating islands for a very long time. And and we've built these incredible islands that are really thriving and robust and filled with bold, innovative people working inside of them. And but that took a lot of time, energy, effort, right? And now we can have this digital platform that can provide these bridges, so that we can learn from each other's islands and take what works for our communities back, or just leave our island entirely and have, you know, but how do you know what the opportunities are in and around the other islands unless we get organized and come together, which is what this era for me feels like. And when there's art that goes into the intersection that brings more people into the game, by increasing the representation of who participates in the game, we're tipping that dial. And that's why I love Butterfly Books so much, in terms of integrating the messages in the earliest stages of a child's connection to his or her community, right? And I want to, and how important it is to have the messages continue, right? To land on everybody the right way.
Yeah.
Because it's hard work.
Yeah, it is a lot of work. Because I was, even with all the work that I do, you know, I've got two daughters. Sky's 4 years old and Zoe's 1. And Sky, she is, as much as I do this stuff and, you know, try and be not kind of inflict any biases or anything on her, she'll still come up with things like, oh, you know, I can't do that, that's for boys. I'm like, oh, where do you get that from? So, you know, even though she's in this, you know, what I'm doing, it's still there. So it's a lot of work that needs to be done.
Right. And the more connected we are in doing that work, right, collectively, first of all, it's more fun because we learn about more authors and books and opportunities to explore other content and cultures, right? And then it's a more accurate representation of the world that we're living in today, right? And it can be the place that we're trying to make it. It takes investment, grit, and perseverance, and a network. And so I'm so excited to be experimenting with how we can use the Women in Soccer Network to increase the reach that the books have, and the other women and allies working in and around the game can really make a collective impact. And we're really grateful for you being here. I could talk to you till 4 o'clock in the morning about all the things with blues and banning football and and I'm sure other authors and women who are joining us today have some other real heavy, bold opinions on the matter as well. Tell us where we can buy your book, and can we get it into libraries? Like, can it be a part of a larger thing where it's in a school district, or sky's the limit, right? If we want to do it and have the right network, we can make it happen.
That's it. So at the moment, they're on our website, butterflybooks.co.uk. And there's also some fun football-related activities on there too. So the books can be purchased there, and we will ship to the US as well. It's a UK-based store. But we're also looking to try and, get them out in the US. I know there's a bit of a language issue with the difference in.
we're all soccer people on this call though, yeah. So we get it and we like it.
Yeah. So our website is where you can get it, and I mean, I have had a few of the books in some of the local libraries in Westchester, New York, but I will look to try and make sure that we can get them in as many places as possible as well. One of the other things we're working towards is maybe even kind of finding a US publisher to publish a US version of the book. Maybe starting with that one might be a good one. So yeah, that's the plan moving forward.
Yes, so the greater network out there listening, okay, like this is why we're doing this. This is what the network is doing. If you know anybody at Penguin or Oprah or anything, like send it our way and we can support the authors who are in the network and trying to make a contribution to elevate our collective soccer and community culture. So Kerrine, thank you so much, and Jason, and we're just really thrilled to support Butterfly Books. And my mommy is a footballer, and we'll close with this. I mean, the image of like the current U.S. women's national team, like breastfeeding on the sideline, as opposed to what Joy Fawcett probably had to go to in like 1996. That's the journey, right? And we've come a long way. And so we deserve to be on that sideline with a baby on your shoulder. And I think they're going to stay there. Don't you get that feeling?
Yeah.
Those women aren't backing down. So I love them for that. So I'm really excited for things to come, especially with more voices like Butterfly Books in the space. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
So at this point, enough from me. I will hand it to Maria Murnane, a best-selling author with a series of wonderful books for adults. Lead us in our panel and welcome the other incredible authors to the stage as well. Maria, please join me on stage.
Hey, Rach. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you great.
Great. Okay. All right, so we're going to bring our other panelists up. Should we do like a drum roll? Okay.
Yeah, let's do it.
So we have two more amazing panelists. So all three of our panelists, they tell stories to shatter stereotypes and empower girls and boys to be their authentic selves and to see everyone around them through an inclusive lens. So I want to bring up our next panelists. First, we have Auntie Montalbano, who has written a YA series. YA stands for young adults, so young adult novels, the Soccer Sisters series, as well as a novel called Breakaway, which, correct me if I'm wrong, Andy, I believe Breakaway was the prequel to the Soccer Sisters, is that correct? And I love this. So Publishers Weekly, which is a huge publication in the publishing industry. If you get reviewed by them, it's amazing. So Publishers Weekly called her book Breakaway, quote, an ideal pick for readers more interested in scoring goals than boyfriends. I love that. Way to be like a role model. So that's Andy. And then I'd like to bring Kate Parker onto the screen. So Kate Parker has a great story because she's a professional photographer who has a series of photography books. Strong is the New Pretty is the book series. Also includes Play Like a Girl and The Heart of a Boy. And the series has been so successful that it's led to collaborations with brands such as Athleta, Kellogg's, and Oxygen, and has inspired Kate to launch a philanthropic arm of Strong is a New Pretty, partnering with organizations like Girls on the Run and the Bully Project that invest in girls' health and education. And Kate has a dog named Tobin Heath. So you gotta love that. So good. So welcome. So I'd like to do, so we just heard Kerrine's story. So I'd like to have each one of you share with our guests today how you became authors. So if you could just kind of share your quick backstory, and Andy, we'll start with you.
Okay, sure. Thank you guys so much for including me in this awesome panel. Congrats to Kerrine. I can't wait to see the book and get the books, and I'll do my best to help them into the libraries here in West. My story is really kind of a parallel path. You know, I grew up playing soccer in Florida. Loved it. I was just that's all I did pretty much. But I was also a good student, so I ended up playing it in college, and then I went on to become a TV producer. So I was really a storyteller. I was a supervising producer at the Today Show for a really long time. And, you know, so just telling the stories, and I had nothing to do with soccer for quite a while, except for I will say that I was the producer on the Today Show during the '99 Women's World Cup, and I met a certain Brandy Chastain that time. So, you know, I really had stepped away from soccer altogether. I was focused on, you know, being a TV producer, but my father had been a writer, and it was always just in my mind. So I decided to give it a shot, and I wrote an adult thriller, and it took me a really long time. It took 2 years, but then you know, as I was waiting for that book to get published, which it didn't ultimately, not yet. See, you gotta be optimist. I decided to sort of follow that old adage of write what you know. So I wrote 25 pages about a little girl soccer player, because I also saw that there were no books like that for me when I was growing up. There were no athletic soccer girls books with protagonists that I could identify with, and I really just felt like there needed to be a genre for girl athletes. So I got a book contract right away with Penguin for Breakaway, and so that was the first book, and it's a fiction story about a team outside of New York City in the suburbs. And you know, basically, it's one of the most important things is that I wanted to have an authentic soccer voice, which I did because I used my own memories. And at the time, I started coaching my daughters and sons' teams, so I had a lot of good material. But then they wanted me to basically write a tennis book, and I'll shorten this up, but essentially, I was committed to writing a series. So I had to leave the big publishing house to kind of do what I wanted to do. And then I worked with a digital startup publisher. So I've kind of gone through all of the different possibilities. And it was called In This Together Media, together meaning to get her. And the focus was really to have a strong female protagonist. And that's where the Soccer Sisters series was born. Ultimately, I moved the series to Source Books, which is a large independent publisher. And then there were 3 books that, as you said, Breakaway was the prequel, and then it's sort of the protagonist in Breakaway becomes the coach in the series Soccer Sisters. And then every book is from a different perspective of a player on the team. So it has a different protagonist every time, and they have different backgrounds. And then there are also messages, you know, one addresses bullying, one addresses inclusion, one addresses sort of privilege. And so, you know, without being heavy-handed, there are most definitely messages in the stories. And beyond that, I do a lot of advocacy for shattering stereotypes globally. I work with coaches across continents, and you know, I just hope, I know we'll talk about this, I hope later, but I just love reaching the kids. I just love when I meet a kid who's read one of my books and says, hey, you know, I really love this part. Even if they're shy at first, there's just nothing better.
Thank you. Okay, Kate, you want to share your story? And Kerrine, feel free to join us if you can turn your camera on. Great.
Andy, I love that so much because I felt like growing up, all we had was Sweet Valley High. And I would have loved to like read books about girls that played soccer. And I love that when like you get to fill a void that you would have liked when you were a kid. And I feel like I try to do that with my books. And I'll talk a little bit about my path to becoming an author. It was honestly like not my goal. It was not even my idea. But started, and it's funny, your story is really similar. I started as a, before as a photographer, I worked at an ad agency and I worked as an editor at CNN. So I was used to making things on a screen compelling, and had my kids, and I have 2 girls, and just was trying to capture who they were. And who they were was kind of like the kind of kid I was, which was muddy and not smiling for the camera, didn't want to brush my hair, put on a cute outfit. And so I just captured who they were without a lot of change. And throughout that, I was also noticing like everything that we would see of women or girls was filtered or facetuned or photoshopped or altered in some way. And I didn't want my girls to think that they needed to change who they were or alter anything just to be like considered beautiful or to be loved. And so I did this gallery show here in Atlanta, where I live, in 2014, which I was so excited about. And it was sort of the first time that all the images were together. And it was all my college soccer teammates came down and were there for the opening. It was like such a cool, fun thing. And nothing sold. Not one single image at the gallery sold. They're literally upstairs in my living room right now. They're all in my living room. 20 images on this, one of those stupid double story foyer. What are you supposed to do with it? I'm like, oh, I have 20 images that but then I honestly, I swear it's my soccer like training, because I still play. I played my whole life, played in college. I didn't give up. I just got mad. And I was like, you know what? There's still something here. If maybe somebody didn't want to buy these images and put them in their house, but I still think this message is worthy. So I decided to act like a PR person, and I sent it out to, I sent the images, a Dropbox of the images, a synopsis of what it was about, and then a few quotes from the girls in a body of an email. And I literally went to like a website I thought might share it, contact at Huffington Post, contact, like I didn't have anybody's name, and I didn't hear anything back for a while, but I just kept at it. I kept doing it because I think I was just fueled. I was just like, don't give up, don't give up. And then one blog ran it. And then another blog ran it because they saw it on that blog. And then a week later, CNN called, and then the Today Show called. And then from that, a publisher reached out. And then the book actually ended up going to auction, which I think there were 6 or 7 publishers interested in publishing it. And it was funny because all this attention was on this project. And I was so stressed because I was like, what is the point of this? Little girls are not going to read, HuffPost.com. And when there was a chance to be like, oh, it's something you can make that you can give to somebody that can be on their coffee table, or you can gift it to your girlfriend or your daughter or your mother or your grandmother, it felt finally like, oh, it makes so much sense. So that's kind of how it's sort of a non-traditional path to publishing. But I'm so thankful for the opportunity to get to honestly expand on the project, because up to that point, it was just my daughters and their friends, and strength does not look like that across the board. And the book was a chance to really diversify the project and shoot girls from all over the country and girls, what strength looks like in girls all over. And so Strong as New Pretty was published 4 years ago, like this month. And then I followed up with a journal, Strong as New Pretty journal. And then we did Heart of a Boy, which it's taking that same message of, acceptance and loving our kids for who they are, but just extending it to boys. And then my last book was called Play Like a Girl. And it's really just like a love letter to soccer. And like all the lessons that I learned. And it's got girls like 3 to 63 who's all play soccer. So it's just photography books. So I'm starting work on my 5th book now. So I love it so much. Like all I want to do is just keep doing books because I really enjoy it so much. And but yeah, I'm super thankful.
It's fantastic. Thank you so much. Okay, so now I've got some questions I want to ask. I'm gonna kind of do like a hot seat situation. So my first question is for Kerrine. So Kerrine, you mentioned to me the other day that you don't consider yourself a writer, but that you do have a story to tell. And that is not true. You are a writer. You're a writer. You have like a bunch of books. So You have to believe in yourself. But my question is, I think a lot of people who are attending today might feel that same way. A lot of people might be hesitant. So how did you get past that?
That's an interesting question, and something that I was thinking about recently, and I know my mom's on here as well, is I remember being at school. I was probably about 10 years old, and I had a report that was sent home that said, my English wasn't very strong. And my mom I think she must have went to the school and said, well, what can she do to improve her, her grades for English? And the teacher actually said to my mom, there's nothing that she can do. I'll have to catch up with mom. So, and then, and I know that's, my mom came back and said that to me. And I think that kind of thing. So this is the kind of thing that we're quite trying to address, even like when I'm writing the books, is them misconceptions, stereotypes, and, letting people know that they can do things if they work hard enough. There's always a way that you can achieve something. I guess we've had quite a bit of coverage with the books, especially in the UK. So I guess that's been something that's boosted my confidence in me, like you say, maybe being a writer, not just telling a story. So that, I guess that's an important, just seeing how, and also just support. There's a lot of people who work with us on the books, and support from the team as well in what we do.
I mean, all writers are plagued by insecurity, but you are a writer. Don't ever forget that. You're definitely
I was going to say, as soon as anybody's a writer, as soon as they start writing, you're a writer.
So my next question is for Andy. So Andy, you and I both write novels, fiction, and I know that everyone's process is different. So what is your process? Like, do you use an outline? And how do you deal with writer's block?
Okay, those are good questions. I do an outline. I generally, as I mentioned earlier, that each book has a different protagonist and different perspective. So I usually start with who is that character and what part of their life story am I going to tell. I will say, like, for the aspiring writers of fiction, I definitely try to find a beginning, middle, and end time frame. So, for example, I did one book in a week-long summer camp. So it's like the lead up to summer camp, then you're at camp, and then the end. And then I did a winter season. I live in the Northeast, so they have a winter season. So we did, the beginning of that season. Another book was the outdoor season. And, so I essentially, one was at a tournament. I'm trying to sort of help myself by creating a time frame that helps with the arc of the story, right? And then I guess I would think about that character, and, you really have to write, as you know, when you're writing fiction, you really have to sort of live in their world. And so you have to create that in your mind, including the details and where are they going to have these conversations. And then I guess I kind of plot it out, and then you just have to go. When I started writing my first book, it was called The Golden Hour. It was about a man who goes out into a frozen lake and falls through the ice. And it was all about what happens when you become thermic. And I had to do so much research about that. I had to talk to doctors, I had to talk to scientists and figure out, because I like the authentic voice. But, I basically bogged myself down in the research, and I didn't do the writing. So, sometimes you just have to start. And then to answer the second part of your question, how do I deal with writer's block? I read a really good book, and I recommend it for anybody who's trying to write for the first time and really has great ideas and doesn't know the nuts and bolts of how to actually do it. Like, where do I put the commas? How do I do this? I had to start from scratch. And one of them is a book by Stephen King, of all people, called On Writing. And I don't know if anybody's read it before, but it's a really easy read, and it's I found it to be just super practical information. And one of the biggest tips that I followed was, you have to make progress. And so some people can write for 6 or 8 hours a day. Like, you do a time limit, or you can do a word count, like writing, longer books. And I could waste 5 hours on, clicking on Twitter and Facebook. So I had to be a little bit more disciplined myself and give myself a word limit. and say, okay, I'm going to write 1,000 words, good words or bad words. It doesn't matter. I'm going to get to that deadline every time I sit down to write, or else I'm just going to waste a lot of time. And so a lot of times when I have to do writer's block, I just either plow ahead and write crap and then acknowledge that it's not good, but somewhere it gets better, or I walk my dog and just go somewhere else and say, I wrote my books with small kids in the house, and I think I should deserve whatever big publishing prize for that, to write with small children. So it just takes a lot of discipline, frankly.
Yeah, I think the one thing I remember from that book was that Stephen King was like out of his mind when he wrote Cujo. I think he was like on cocaine the entire time he wrote that book. And also, don't use adverbs. Adverbs are bad. Don't use too many adverbs in your writing. Yes.
Yeah, it's super helpful, and it's a really easy book to read. It's just like reading a novel, and you can get it anywhere. It's old, but it doesn't matter. Yeah. I really recommend it if you don't really know how to do that.
Yes, and there's another one, Self-Editing for Fiction Writers. That's a really good book too. Self-editing.
Yeah, I have an entire bookshelf, like how to write dialogue, how to write a scene, how to do. There are so many resources out there that you can just go and figure it out, and then you're a writer. There you go.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to move on to let's see, Kerrine. Okay, so it doesn't sound like you have this whole business behind you, but you did self-publish your books. Like, you've created this whole imprint, Butterfly Books. You've done this all on your own. So what do you think are the pros and cons of that approach? And how exactly does one self-publish a children's book? What do you have to actually do?
Mm-hmm. So when we started out, me and my brother, we didn't know anything about publishing. So I guess to start out, we did a lot of research. We attended Book Expo. So I went to, it was London Book Fair because I was in the UK. I joined the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, which has been a great help. They do lots of events on, writing. Even like if you've written a story, then they'll, there's a group of people who can check things for you. So that was quite useful at the start. And we did have a conversation on whether we would publish traditionally or try to publish traditionally or self-publish. And because it was an illustrated picture book for us, we didn't go too far into kind of researching on traditional publishing, because we wanted to make sure that the message came across. We wanted to make sure we addressed the stereotypes and misconceptions as much as possible. And with traditional publishing, the publishing houses usually match an illustrator to you, and you don't get as much input into the illustrations. So it was important for us when we were writing, for example, my mommy is an engineer, trying to address the misconceptions about what an engineer looks like. We didn't want someone who, didn't have that knowledge behind it. Having someone with a hard hat and greasy hands would be totally against what we were trying to achieve. So we had, it's a friend of mine actually who's an illustrator, Marissa Peguino, who she's illustrated all of the books for us. So I guess that was one of the biggest decisions in choosing whether we traditionally published or self-published. So we chose the self-publishing route for that main reason. And then after that, it was lots of research for all the stages as we go through. And I think my mommy as an engineer was kind of the test for everything. We just kind of went straight in and learned as we went along. So the first thing, I guess, was the writing and the illustrating, which I think was probably the easier bit and the fun bit. But then it came to trying to get the book out there with marketing, PR, distribution, and that was the hardest side of the self-publishing. One section I've missed in between there is an editor, which is really important, making sure that we had the grammar and the way the book came across was in a nice way. So we made sure we had a good editor on board before we did any printing at all. So I'd say the tough bit was the marketing side. We worked with a PR company for a few years now, which has helped us, get some coverage in, national UK news and radio, TV, that kind of thing, which is really helpful in getting the book out there. But yeah, I guess making that decision on which route you choose, this depends on what your project is, what your book's about.
Yeah, you have all the control, but then you have to do everything on your own. So, yeah. Okay, then I want to move on to Kate. So this is kind of flipping. So Kate, you've worked with, big publishers and they came to you. So I'm not sure if you would even know the answer to this question, but I know with nonfiction traditionally, say you have a business book or a self-help book, to get that published, you don't actually have to write the book or create the book. You have to create what's called a book proposal, which is essentially a monster business plan about what your book will be and how you will market your book. Do you have to do that for a photography book? Do you know? Or
so what I did, I created a proposal. It was funny because a publisher first contacted me and said, "Do you want to do a book?" And I was like, heck yes, I want to do a book. And then literally the next day, an agent contacted me and said, "Hey, I'd like to represent you. And I was like, "Yeah, but I already have a publisher. What are you talking about? Like if, Random House says we want to do a book," I'm like, "Yes, of course I do a book." And he's like, "No, just slow down and decide what kind of book you want to do and then propose it to the, because the more because basically they wanted to do a book based off of 20 images. And so he was like, "Well, what do you want to say? What do you want to do?" And it was super helpful to have an outline. So I basically said, yeah, this is who, it was like a 30-page proposal of basically like a lot of the book. Like I wanted to look like this. I wanted to have this message. I think this is the audience. Is it moms? Is it daughters? And I'm like, well, trying to figure out all that stuff beforehand and then laying it out. And then the conversations with the publishers were like, well, how do you see it? Because it wasn't like I knew photography and I knew the story I wanted to tell, but I don't know how to sell a book, so and I'm open to and it's funny, I'm doing a proposal right now for my next book. And I'm like, well, this is the idea I want to share. How do you think it's best that most people can see it? I like having messages with my work. Oh, this is not Tobin. This is not Tobin Heath. That's Mabel. Tobin Heath is very fast and very tricky, just like the real Tobin.
Oh, nice.
I think the proposal, even if it's an exercise for you, like I think it really helps you figure out what do you want to say and what do you want this to look like. And for photography books, it's much more visual. But I think a similar thing is like Kerrine was saying, if you self-publish, you're in charge of the marketing. I hire a PR agency when I have a book to help augment whatever my publisher is doing, because you don't have that many chances. And I want to, even if I have to invest some of my own money, I want to make sure that it gets the most sort of bang for your buck. Like I want as many people to be able to to decide if they want to buy it or not to not have heard about it. It's the worst, like Kerrine said, it is the worst part. I hate it. You feel like you never are doing enough. Writing it and seeing it when it comes out and shooting it. I love it. But then it's out in the world and it's like your skin is off I am my worst self when my books come out. Like I hate me when my books come out.
I can't read my books because I just start I want to change everything once they come out. And I can't ever read this again.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to move back to Andy. So Andy, you mentioned that with books you can change a kid's life without even knowing it. So I was wondering if you could elaborate on what you mean by that.
Yeah, sure. I guess I'll go back to touching on what Kate was just saying, and there are just so many pieces of trying to work with the marketing and the agents and all of that, and sometimes you can just forget who you're writing for. And there was this one story that I'll share. I was invited to go back to my elementary school. I grew up on an island close to Miami. And so I went back to my school, and it was until 6th grade, but this school now went to 8th grade, and they ended up talking just to the middle schoolers. And, they looked so bored. I mean, I had this entire cafeteria full of like kids sitting there. And one of the things that I had said to them that day was, I was you. I literally was you sitting in these chairs. And I didn't ever think that I could write a book, but I'm here to tell you that you can do that. And you shouldn't think that you can't. And I'm like living proof. I was just a kid on this island, and now I've read all these books. And so you should just believe that. And, I left that day thinking, I don't know if I reached anybody. I mean, I felt it was one of my first talks I ever gave. I felt like I bombed. And, then I think the teachers make the kids sometimes write thank you notes. That's cool. About a couple of weeks later, I got a huge stack, and I always keep them, a huge stack of letters. But there were a few of them, especially from boys in particular, which, my books are for boys and girls, but there were just a few of them that said, I never thought that I could do that, but now I think I'm going to try. Or, they just, I guess my message was, you just don't really know who you're going to reach, and you don't know who's listening, and they don't always show you. But a lot of the times, especially if you have strong messages, and I think all of our, stories do, you actually are reaching kids, and it can be transformative. So that was just a really powerful moment for me, because it was the school that I went to. And then in another school, I went back 3 years in a row to the same classroom, because they got so into the story and into each book that they made a play that they performed for me. They created a play from the book. And so, I guess like sometimes you can get bogged down in the adult world of publishing, but it's probably like for the coaches out there who dealt with all the nonsense of a club or the politics of all of that, but then when they get out on the field, you're playing the game with the kids, and you're having fun, and you're reaching them. So yeah, I mean, it can be very powerful, and I think that's why we all do it. That's why I do it.
Great, thanks. And then Kate, I wanted to ask you, so your first book, you took pictures of your daughters, but then that expanded. And so now how do you find the subjects for your books? And then also, I've looked at some of your books, and they're so cool because they have a quotation mark or a quotation with each photograph from the subject of that photograph. And they're always so profound and wise. And I'm wondering, like, how do you pull that out of the kids or the subjects they're adults? Like, do you interview them, or how does that work?
Those are great questions. So yeah, the first, I basically I crowdsource. And so I'm a commercial photographer. So I mean, before COVID, I used to travel a lot for work. And so if I'm shooting a book, I'll be like, okay, I'm going to LA. I put a call out on my social media looking for whatever I'm looking for, but if I'm in LA, I want maybe surfers and skaters and things that are sort of, geographically, like that will show that I'm a different part of the country, different interests. And in addition to that, I also reach out because I don't want to limit the girls in the book or the boys in the book to people that may know me, because that's limiting. So then I'll also reach out to like organizations like a local children's hospital or Boys and Girls Club or Girls on the Run or Girl Scouts or places like that, just to get sort of a wider diversity in the kids. And then, so social media, people will email me a lot, it's funny. It's like, if I like, do I want to put it on Facebook? Cause I'm going to get a lot of emails. And then, so it's like, how many do I need and how wide do I need this? And then, sorry, what was the second question? I got
Oh, so the quotes
Oh.
that accompany the photos, like how do you get them? Like, do they just email you? Here's what I think of this, or do you interview them and then you cut it down and take that one little nugget that works? Or,
so it's funny. I've sort of grown as I've shot. So now I've found that like I voice interview and I voice transcribe as I'm after the shoot, because I try to do it while I shoot, but then the pictures are like that. So you can't really be talking while you're shooting. So I'll do a quick 10-minute interview, immediately transcribe it, and then pull from there. But then I send a questionnaire, and a questionnaire that online, and then so the kids will fill those out. And then a lot of times we'll still have to go back and fine tune the quote, because say their photo is about, mountain climbing, but I have a more generic quote about strength. So I'll just call and say, hey, can you talk to me a little bit about how do you feel specifically when you're mountain climbing, or whatever we're looking for. That's like, it's kind of a lengthy process, that part, because generally in the books we have 200 kids. So it's sort of all that back and forth, trying to get the right quote with the right photo in the right chapter. But it's honestly, it's like my favorite part, getting to hear these stories and sharing a little part of their lives.
Well, so that's the perfect segue to my next question. So Andy just shared like an amazing story about how she touched a kid and then they made a play based on her books and stuff. So you all know, like, writing is lonely. Like you spend a lot of time in front of your computer by yourself thinking, no one's ever going to read this. This is terrible. So, but then you have those moments where it's all worth it. So I'm just wondering if you guys want to share like a moment. I'll share a moment quickly. Like when I had just my very first book had come out, and I was sitting in Whole Foods in the coffee shop, and I was eating lunch, and I looked, and the girl sitting next to me was reading my book. And I couldn't believe it. Like, I freaked out. I wanted to play it cool and be like, oh, hey, where'd you get that? But instead I was like, oh my God, I wrote that book. And I was so excited. But she was so excited too. And she showed me that she had dog-eared like 50 pages because she wanted to tell all of her friends about all the funny things that were in my book. So like, it was the most exciting thing that ever happened to me. It was the most exciting thing that ever happened to her. And we were both so excited. And that just made everything that I'd gone through to get that book published worth it. So that's my story. And do you guys have a story that you want to share? We'll start with you, Kerrine.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of similar. You spend all that time. For us, it takes about a year to work on the book, get the research, and publish. And by the end of it, you just want to. You feel like you just want to stop, But then you always get, or once in a while, you'll get a video either on social media or someone sends a message to say, oh yeah, my son or daughter's got the book, and a video of them reading it, and then it just makes it all worth it. It gives you that extra drive to start on the next book, or after the burnout from the last.
Keeps going. Yeah. And what about you, Kate?
I mean, the messages you get that people are like, that it means something, or they go back to it when it's when they're having a tough day, is, I don't know, they make me cry, and I love them so much. But there's this one photo of my daughter Alice, who's my youngest daughter, and it's funny, it's my most popular picture ever because it was stolen for a meme, and it's like she's screaming in the water. It is this black and white photo. She's screaming, and it's in Strong as Being Pretty. And somebody made a meme, and it just says, "Remember her, like go back out and get her." Like basic. And I was like, "Oh, that's fine. You can have it." We had somebody come to the house the other day. We have to replace the carpet because the dogs ate all the carpet. And the lady walks in the house. Sorry, the dogs. The carpet lady walked in the house, and I have that photo. It's behind my husband's desk when you first come in, and she goes, "Oh, I have that photo at my desk too." And I was like, "Wait, that's my daughter." And she goes, "Oh, I just love it because it just makes me feel so good. I saw it online and I printed it out and I framed it." Like,
no.
wait. I was like, "Alice, come here." I was like, "That's her. I took that photo." And I was just like, that it resonated enough with her to like hang up. I was like, I have it hung because it's my daughter, but you have it hung because it makes you feel something and about yourself. And I was just like, I'm done. This is good. It made my month.
Right. It's incredible how one interaction like that can just change your life. Okay, before we move to audience questions, I want to ask each one of you, if you have one piece of advice for aspiring authors, what would it be? My piece of advice would be, because I meet people all the time who say, oh, I've always wanted to write a novel. I've always wanted to write a novel, and then they never did it, and they're never going to do it, because so few people actually do it. So I always say, if you really want to do it, it's like, just do it. Like, just do it, because you'll be so happy no matter what happens. Once you finish and you type the end, you'll feel this feeling of accomplishment that is really overwhelming, and it's worth it. So I just say, just sit down and do it. That's my biggest piece of advice. So Andy, what's your piece of advice?
Well, I mean, I guess I probably have to second that. I hate to be unoriginal, but I remember when I finished that first novel, the adult novel, I sent it to my brother, and he was like, no matter whatever happens with this book, you did it. I spent 2 years writing it. I had a kid and I was breastfeeding, and I sort of powered through it all. And I was like, no, I'm not a success unless this is, published. And he was really the one that said, no, that's not the way you need to live. No matter what happens with this book, it's an accomplishment that you did it. And I guess, Maria, I would also say that it can be very lonely, as you said. It's a very solitary thing. I mean, it sounds like you, Kate and Kerrine, have, bigger teams, but when you're sort of writing novels, it's kind of a one person show. But I asked a friend of mine, so my dad had written books, but then he passed away. So he wasn't around when I decided to write. So I couldn't ask him any questions. But his writing partner is a man named Carl Hiaasen, that some of you may have read his books. He writes some books for adults, and very successful writer. So I asked him, I said, do you have any advice for me? How do I write? Like, how do I do this? Back before I had no idea at all. And he said, he sent me an email with just 2 words, which just said, keep writing. That was it. I was like, that's all you got? But it was really, it's true. You just have to, it takes a lot of perseverance and a lot of patience. And, so I really also recommend, like what you're writing about, because, takes so much longer than you could ever imagine, but just do it. You're right, Maria.
Gotta do it. You sound like a Nike ad. All right, Kate, what about you? Do you have some advice?
I would say not to take, if you are passionate about something, if you believe in something, I guarantee you somebody else will too. And I guarantee you there will be an audience for it. And that to not take your first no as a final no. Taking an unapologetic viewpoint and just hustling. We have control over those things, hustling, working hard, getting it out there, not taking those no's as a reflection on your worth as a writer or a person, but just, not the right fit. And just like moving around those no's, sort of like, just to get to the point where you need to get to, not letting sort of there's so much, so many setbacks, and if you let it stop you, then you're not going to get to where you should go.
And it's almost like getting cut from a team. You got to just say, that doesn't mean I can't play. I'm just going to find a better fit. I'm just going to keep plugging. Yeah, I agree totally, Kate.
Yeah. And then Kerrine, you want to wrap it up?
Yeah, and I kind of pulling in from those points as well, and about the passion and the hard work. It is hard work, but if you have the passion for it, that's kind of what drives you through. I know, especially with our books, it's all about addressing a social mission, and I'm passionate about that mission. So no matter what, I'm going to try and do my best to get that out.
Right. And it looks like Rachel is asking if you guys have any other recommendations for books that people can read that might be helpful. We mentioned On Writing, Self-Editing for Fiction Writers. I think, is it Bird by Bird? Is that what it's called? That's another big book for fiction writing. I don't know if you guys have any other suggestions for books that can be helpful.
Well, one thing I will say that I found unhelpful was to read too many books in the same genre, because sometimes I found myself mimicking a voice and it wasn't my own voice. And so sometimes, I think you have to almost step away. I mean, of course, you want to educate yourself about what's out there already and what is selling and what people like. But at the same time, I think you have to remember that you can, at least I found when I read another book, I was like, oh, then I start writing like that person. And that doesn't work. You have your own individual voice, and you sort of have to keep it a little bit pure. It's easy, like, especially when you're getting started, to get a little clouded up by other influences.
Great. Okay, we've got a couple questions. For Kerrine, what is your next book going to be?
Interesting. We have had a few industries, contact us to ask about potential other books, but it's at the moment we've got 8 books, and we've got lots of people that we're trying to collaborate with in different industries. So I think we're going to spend some time at the moment just trying to push them existing books forward, and collaborate as much as we can with other people who have the same kind of social mission as well.
Great. And then we have a question for Kate. So because your books are photography books, what is an author visit look like for you when you go out and promote your book? What do you do?
So I give a speech, and I feel like so thankful because I have slides of photos and no one is looking at me. So it's basically like I talk about how strong Is New Pretty came to be, about not giving up. And then I also talk about how important it is and if I'm talking to girls and boys together, I include Heart of a Boy, but it's about trying to celebrate ourselves for who we are, and that is enough. And, if you basically just through the photos in the books and the words of the kids themselves, trying to get kids to appreciate who they are, and know that they, like who they are by themselves, no changes, no filters, none of that is enough. That's sort of the presentation. It's taking the ideas of the book and the messages of the book and just sort of distilling them into 30 minutes or so.
And then another question we have for you is that you said you were working on a new book, but you didn't tell us what it was about. Do you want to?
Oh my gosh, I would love. I'm actually like, it is so hard right now because it's funny that Kerrine is saying your books are about social issues, and so I had this idea about doing a book about joy. And I wanted, just after what we've been through, I thought it was joy, trying to find joy, trying to chase joy, trying to create joy. But then I was like, I'm missing this message of empowering girls or empowering boys. So it's funny, I had a conversation with my editor yesterday. I'm like, I don't know if I want to do that. So we're sort of pivoting. So then I would love to do the next book, kind of going back to my core audience of girls and women, and of exactly what that photo that I just talked about was about. Remember her, reminding our girls to not lose that part of them that makes them feel like such a badass. That time when you're you think you can do anything, you're loud and you're confident, and that reminding women they used to feel like that. So trying to get our girls not to lose it, but trying to remind our women that we had it and we can get it back. So if anybody can distill that into a word for me, I'd welcome it. Cause I'm circling it, but I'm not right there on it yet.
We have one question from our stealth attendee, Brandy Chastain, who is here. So maybe you'll end up at her table. She's wondering how all of you, how has soccer shaped your messaging in your books beyond hard work and that you had to learn, and that hard work that you had to learn and use, or does it surprise you by coming up in random ways, your soccer experience in your writing? Sounds like perseverance, determination.
Yeah, you can't give up. I think that's always been sort of a surprise. I'll tell you, I had one moment that I used to write the Today Show script, right? And sometimes that was live, and I was in the control room and the show would change. And then they would say, well, you need to rewrite this part. And sometimes I had to write something in, I don't know, 10 seconds. And, I really found that I was pulling from my experiences on the field in those moments of terror. Like, how am I going to do this? You know, and I think that it just, it created who I am as a human, and it definitely spilled over into how I handled the world all the time, almost in every way, not just in writing.
Okay, so it looks like we have about 11 minutes before our event will officially end. So what we're going to do is we're going to send everybody back to the tables for networking. So the four of us, we can go to our tables, and then if anyone has specific questions for us individually, they can pop into our table. So if you want to ask me a question, just find me and then double click on that table or any of the other women here. And then we can spend the last 10 minutes like that. And Rachel, are you going to come back on the screen and say anything? Rachel usually... Rachel?
This out. Hello,
Rachel.
Maria, you did a fantastic job. There is not much more for me to say except thank you. Each of you are incredibly inspiring, and I know I can speak for mostly everyone on this line that we appreciate your time and your energy and the work you're putting into this world. I put in some links if you want to find any of the works that these incredible authors have created and are going to continue to create. Visit their sites, visit their pages, and get your hands on one. Thanks so much for being here, everyone.